Well, I haven't taken any videos in a while. You can see I've made some progress. I'm using the pieces I tore off as kind of stepping stones because I don't want to walk directly on the styrofoam insulation because I'd probably end up down in there. Where's David? Oh, he's downstairs. These are the pieces that I tore up. You can see I cut it into strips so I can tear it up instead of trying to tear off a big 4x8 sheet. I cut down the seam of each one crossways, across there, just cut the rubber roof, and then I'm using pry bars to dig, just kind of slide underneath it and then pry it up as I go, and just keep sliding farther and farther under and prying it up as I go. And it seems to be working. Up in the front corner way up there, and then around the skylight over here where the skylight had been leaking. That was a pain in the butt because the wood was all rotten and it didn't come up as a piece. It came up in pieces. Kind of like trying to dig Wheaties out of a bowl with a kitchen knife. A whole lot of no fun. But getting there. I've just got a little bit of tearing off left to do here at the end, and I'm replacing this all with the 1/2-inch plywood there. Sliding it up underneath the front cap up there is going to be fairly straightforward. There's plenty of space there for 1/2-inch. But in the back you can see I have the there's one piece of the end cap sticking up and the other piece is kind of angled up a little bit. To bend that kind of carefully so you don't go flexing it at the back corners here. There's not a lot of room underneath the fiberglass body cap piece, so trying to shove the 1/2-inch plywood underneath that may be fun. That may be entertaining to watch. We'll have to see. And I'm hoping to just disconnect these screws, take out these screws and disconnect the front of the ladder from the roofing, and then just put a block of wood or something underneath that back piece there to hold it up, just to lift those, just to kind of lift those two legs, lift them up just a little bit so that I can slide the plywood underneath there. You can see here where I've used a circular saw to set it just a little over 1/4 inch, and you can see I made a cut here and a cut there, and then I kind of cut across there and cut up here. You have to be careful not to cut too deep, otherwise you're chopping up all the wires, and boy would that be a headache. I've got all the edge aluminum here, the transition just pried back, and I ordered up some more aluminum, just two 50-foot rolls. I have to go about 33.5 feet down the side here, and they put this together. You can see there's a splice there, and there is another really short piece up front there, about 2 or 3 feet long. I ordered, it's a roll of aluminum 10 inches wide by 50 feet long, and it's used in aluminum siding for housing and stuff. It's painted on both sides, but I've talked to the folks at the rubber roof company, and they assure me that with the primer coat that I'm going to be putting on, that won't be an issue. It'll stick just fine to that painted surface, and that way then I will have one piece aluminum transition all the way from the front all the way down to the back. Getting it stuffed in the back piece and stuffed in the front is going to be a chore, I suspect. You can see as I tear up the roof, this is the ductwork for the air conditioning vent, and it tears up the styrofoam above it is glued to the roofing, underside of the roofing, so it comes up. So what I did was I bought a big 4x8 sheet of 1-inch thick styrofoam, because that's what that is 1 inch thick, and I cut it into 8-inch wide strips, and then I just cut what I need to fill in the parts that I've ripped up. And you can see the nice shiny new stuff, in there, and it works. I didn't glue it down. I'm not going to bother gluing it down or taping it or anything. Once I get the 1/2 inch plywood over the top of this, it's going to have a lot more insulation value than the 1/4 inch plywood ever did. Even with a little bit of damage and tearing I'm doing, you can see I'm kind of tearing off a few millimeters of the surface of the foam as I tear up the roofing. Here's another piece. But I think that 1/2 inch plywood is going to give me a heck of a lot more R value than the little bit of foam I'm tearing up. But that's the progress. You see we're making progress. There's all the junk I'm tearing off the roof. Down both sides of the roof, you can see right here is a strip of wood, a thin strip of wood. That is to screw the ends of the plywood into. But that wood sits on this steel, aluminum, I think this is aluminum, this is obviously steel, it's all rusted, frame. As you can see, the steel comes up and has a little bit of a lip on that aluminum, over that aluminum edge. And you can see the end of that piece is cut. Just a little notch in here to go over this steel lip. Well, of course, the skylight here was leaking down on this end, and way up at that end, the front corner, the front cap was leaking. And so this strip of wood got rotten, especially right here. This piece was all rotten or moldy, and up there was rotten and moldy. And this is just a piece of wood. It rests on top of it. And you can see it's all rotted here. So that piece has got to go. It was a little bit moldy up in that corner way up there as well. But I didn't want to leave any moldy wood on here because mold will spread, mold will grow, even though I sprayed some super mold killer on the wood and on all the foam insulation here. That's what that yellow spray bottle is there. But I thought, better safe than sorry, just cut that out of there. But what am I going to use to replace that goofy little notched edge trim? I don't have a table saw, I don't have a router. So I went to the local hardware store, Menards here in Wisconsin, and I found in the trim section something called picture frame. And lo and behold, there's the end of the picture frame, and you can't really see it, but it is notched out almost perfectly, and it's just the right size. Praise the Lord for little victories. I ended up using 3 pieces, I think. It comes in 8-foot sections. There were a few places where this edging was loose. I could wiggle it a little bit. I could twist it and it would wiggle. And that made me wonder, why did the screws come loose? So I tightened up the screws, and of course, the screws just spun and spun, meaning, yeah, they split off right where it went into the aluminum rail. So some of that I replaced, some of it I just kept the original wood. I just put new self-drilling screws down into there to tighten it all up. Because it's pretty important to have that snug to hold down the ends of the wall, or the ends of the roof where it meets the wall. That's a real bad place for it to start flapping. Not that there's a good place for it to start flapping, I suppose.